Hi, this is Alexandra Kitty, hostess of Officer Down, a true crime podcast where the victims happen to be those working in law enforcement. So today is episode 5, and we're continuing our exploration when it's a regular kind of homicide, not something that happened on the line of duty and the victim happens to be a police officer. So today we're going to talk about the homicide of Master Deputy Tamara Tuitt Bartlett in the United States in 2025. So this is a very recent case. So this is a life of service and a death of violence. So this is the tragedy of Tamara Tuitt Bartlett. On September 27th, 2025, Saturday night, Master Deputy Tamara Tuitt Bartlett, a nearly 20-year veteran of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office in Georgia, was shot and killed in her home in an unincorporated area near Suwanee by her boyfriend, Eric Sumner, 43. The shooting occurred during a domestic dispute at her residence in the villages of Shakerag subdivision of McGinnis Ferry Road. Tuitt Bartlett's teenage son, who witnessed the argument, was also shot multiple times but managed to escape to a neighbor's door where he pounded for help and survived. Sumner fled the scene but was later apprehended by Monroe County deputies after a brief vehicle pursuit on Interstate 75. Court records reveal that Tuitt Bartlett had filed a protective order against Sumner just 5 months earlier in April 2025, citing escalating violence, threats, and his status as a convicted felon who should not have been around her duty weapon. She later dropped the order in May, and the couple had resumed their relationship. Her death marked the second unbearable tragedy for her family. 4 years earlier, her 23-year-old son, Richard Bartlett III, was killed in an unsolved hit-and-run crash, a crime that remains unsolved to this day. So let's talk about the victim. Tamara Tuitt Bartlett dedicated nearly 20 years of her life serving the residents of Gwinnett County, Georgia, as a law enforcement officer with the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office. She rose to the rank of Master Deputy, a position that reflected her experience, professionalism, and leadership within the department. Gwinnett County Sheriff Kibo Taylor described her in a statement. Master Deputy Tuitt Bartlett served our community for nearly 20 years with unwavering dedication, compassion, and integrity, truly embodying the core values of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office. Her commitment to protecting and serving made a lasting impact on all who had the honor of knowing and working alongside her. Her loss is deeply felt throughout our agency and the entire community. She was a devoted mother of 2 sons. She lived in a home off McGinnis Ferry Road in an unincorporated area of Forsyth County near Suwanee, Georgia, in the villages of Shakerag subdivision. Her neighbors described her as a wonderful woman who never bothered anybody. 4 years before her murder, Tuitt Bartlett experienced the devastating loss of her 23-year-old son, Richard Bartlett III, who was killed in a hit-and-run crash on McGinnis Ferry Road, not far from the home where she would be later murdered. On the night of the crash, Richard had been securing a mattress to his car when a driver in a dark 4-door sedan struck him and fled the scene. Despite Tuitt Bartlett's desperate efforts to find justice for her son, no one was ever charged in the case, and Johns Creek police continue to seek the driver to this day. A neighbor reflected on the compounding tragedies. We would not be able to see her again. That's heartbreaking. This family already dealt with a devastating loss. So let's talk about the perpetrator, Eric Sumner. Eric Sumner, 43 of Suwanee, was a convicted felon with a lengthy criminal history. Court records indicate that Sumner had prior felony convictions that legally prohibited him from possessing firearms. Sumner and Tuitt Bartlett had been in an on-again, off-again relationship for more than 3 years. According to the protective order Tuitt Bartlett filed on April 2025, Sumner's behavior had become increasingly erratic, violent, and controlling. So let's talk about the April 2025 protective order. She filed for a temporary protective order against Sumner in Forsyth County Superior Court. In her petition, she stated Sumner had become increasingly insecure and would start arguments out of nowhere, had become irate and aggressive more often. He had threatened her and abused both her and her teenage son. Her 15-year-old son, who has autism, had called 911 for help after one of Sumner's violent outbursts, fearing for his life and his mother's life. Sumner was a convicted felon and should not have been around her duty weapon. The protective order noted that the fear from witnessing the arguments had even a greater impact on her son due to his autism. Despite the clear warnings and documented violence, Tuitt Bartlett requested the judge dismiss the protective order in May 2025. Court records show that the couple had resumed their relationship by the time of her death just 4 months later. Barbara Gibson, director of the Women's Resource Center, explained the tragic cycle. When people think about domestic violence, they think it's a one-time incident where something happens and you leave. But it's far more complicated than that. Victims of domestic violence often stay because of family pressure, money struggles, or fear of leaving someone who threatens them. So let's talk about the villages at Shake Rag and Forsyth County. So this is the crime scene. The shooting occurred at Tuitt Bartlett's home in the villages of Shake Rag subdivision located off McGinnis Ferry Road in an unincorporated area of Forsyth County near the city of Swan. Forsyth County is a part of the Atlanta metropolitan area and is located approximately 35 miles northeast of downtown Atlanta. So let's talk about the timeline of the murder. Saturday, September 27, 2025. At approximately 7:49 p.m., a 911 call came into the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office from a neighbor reporting that a teenage boy had shown up at her door bleeding. The teen told the neighbor that his mother and her boyfriend had been arguing when the man opened fire on both of them. The neighbor applied pressure to the teen's wounds until the paramedics arrived, likely saving his life. The teenager had been shot multiple times and was transported to a nearby hospital where he was listed in stable condition. Shortly after 7:49 p.m., Forsyth County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Tuitt Bartlett's home on McGinnis Ferry Road. Their deputies knocked on the door and attempted to make contact, but received no response. Deputies entered the home and found Tamara Tuitt Bartlett dead in an upstairs bedroom with gunshot wounds. The house showed signs of a violent domestic dispute. Investigators quickly identified Eric Sumner as the suspect and learned he had fled the scene. Detectives tracked Sumner traveling south on Interstate 75 and alerted the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. And the Monroe County deputies located Sumner on I-75 and initiated a vehicle stop. After a brief chase, Sumner was taken into custody. Sumner was charged with murder in the death of Tamara Tuitt Bartlett, 2 counts of aggravated assault with intent to murder for shooting the teenage son multiple times. Additional charges are expected as the investigation continues. The first court appearance happened on Tuesday, September 29, 2025. Eric Sumner appeared in Forsyth County Superior Court for his bond hearing. During the hearing, Sumner appeared confused and tried to speak about injuries and scratches on his body before his attorney stopped him. And he said, and I quote, "I got all these scratches on me and stuff," and his attorney said, "Mr. Sumner, stop talking." The judge denied bond, and Sumner remained in the Forsyth County Jail and is awaiting trial. So, assumed innocent until proven guilty. So Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Friedman's statement, he expressed his condolences and called the shooting a devastating loss for a law enforcement community. The loss of life to violence is senseless, but the loss of a law enforcement officer should hit home to every one of us in the community. Sheriff Freeman also thanked Monroe County deputies for their quick response in apprehending the suspect. The Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office released heartfelt tribute. It's with profound sorrow that Sheriff Kibo Taylor and the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office announced the loss of Master Deputy Tamara Tuitt Bartlett, who was tragically shot and killed off-duty on September 27, 2025. Master Deputy Tuitt Bartlett served our community for nearly 20 years with unwavering dedication, compassion, and integrity, truly embodying the core values of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office. Her commitment to protecting and serving made a lasting impact on all who had the honor of knowing and working alongside her. Her loss is deeply felt throughout the agency and the entire community. We extend our heartfelt condolences to her family, friends, and colleagues during this incredibly difficult time. As we mourn her passing, we also celebrate Master Deputy Tuitt Bartlett's life and the legacy of service she leaves behind. She will never be forgotten. Please keep her loved ones in your thoughts and prayers. Neighbors in the villages of Shake Rag subdivision expressed shock and sadness. One neighbor, Shireen Abanji, said, "We could never even sense anything unusual or anything like that. It's really heartbreaking. She was a wonderful woman." Tuitt Bartlett's case is a textbook example of the domestic violence cycle, escalating abuse, a protective order filed in fear, the victim's decision to drop the order and return to the relationship, and ultimately murder. Barbara Gibson of the Women's Resource Center explained, all kinds of people, regardless of their job, their strength, or even if they have weapons, are vulnerable to being harmed or even killed because of domestic violence. Despite nearly 20 years of law enforcement training, despite being a master deputy with access to a firearm, despite her professional experience recognizing danger, Tamara Tuitt Bartlett could not protect herself from violence in her own home. Tuitt Bartlett's family endured not one, but two unspeakable losses: the unsolved hit-and-run death of her 23-year-old son Richard in 2021, and now her own murder in 2025. Her surviving teenage son, who has autism, not only lost his mother, but also witnessed her murder and himself was shot multiple times. Tuitt Bartlett did everything right. She filed for a protective order, documented Sumner's violence, and cited his status as a convicted felon, who should not have been around her duty weapon. Yet the system could not save her once she made the difficult, complex decision to drop the order and return to the relationship. The murder of Master Deputy Tamara Tuitt Bartlett on September 27, 2025, is a heartbreaking reminder that domestic violence does not discriminate. It can claim anyone as a victim, including those trained to protect others. A nearly 20-year veteran of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, she dedicated her life to serving her community with unwavering dedication, compassion, and integrity. Yet in the end, she could not escape the cycle of abuse that claimed her life at the hands of her convicted felon boyfriend, Eric Sumner. We're waiting on the results of the trial on that one. Her teenage son, already traumatized by the unsolved hit-and-run death of his older brother 4 years earlier, now bears the physical and emotional scars of witnessing his mother's murder and surviving multiple gunshot wounds himself. As Sheriff Ron Friedman stated, the loss of life to violence is senseless, but the loss of a law enforcement officer should hit every one of us in the community. Her legacy of service will endure, even as her death underscores the urgent need for stronger protections of victims of domestic violence, including those who wear the badge. Now, it's interesting. Now, he still has the presumption of innocence, but here's somebody who was in law enforcement, who was a master deputy, who was in a relationship with somebody who was a convicted felon. So we sometimes assume that because somebody is on one side of the tracks, that they do not necessarily find themselves attracted or have relationships with somebody on the other side. So a lot of times we see people in dangerous situations and they think they can handle it, or they think the person can change, or they don't want to look at the past. And it can be a fatal mistake. So this is somebody who would have seen other domestic violence cases, what happens when you remove a protective order, and yet it did nothing in her case. So it gives you a lot to think about. Nobody should end up in such a horrible state. But when we think that everything goes on logic and experience, a lot of times we find out that it's anything but. And a vulnerable teenager is left without his mother. So I hope I've given you something to ponder. Next week will be the season finale, and then season 3 goes into a totally different theme. So I have given you something to think about, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week. Ta-ta for now.